This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Parshas Vayeitzey. So the main figure in Parshas Vayeitzey, of course, is Yaakov Avinu. And Yaakov Avinu is running away from Esav. And the Parsha begins, Vayifka b'makom. He met the place. Literally, he encountered the place. Vayolen sham. And he slept there, Kiva HaShemesh, because the sun set. Vayikach me'avnei hamokim, he took from the stones of the place, Vayosem Ra'ashoisav, and he put it under his head, Vayishkav hamokim ahu, and he slept there. So we're probably all familiar with the Gemara Brachos and Av Chavav Amavez, that when the pasuk says Vayifka b'makom, the Gemara says Ein Pegia Ela Tefila. That when it says he met the place, it means he was mispalel, Ein Pegia Ela Tefila. And the Gemara says from here we learn that Yaakov Avinu was Masakein Tfilas Arvis. Yaakov Avinu was Masakein Maariv. Tonight's subject is the Tfilos that were enacted by the Avos HaKadoshim. We're all familiar that Shachris is Keneged Avram Avinu, Yitzchak was Masakein Mincha, and Yaakov Avinu was Masakein Maariv. So we want to try to understand that. Is that really the case? Does everybody agree to that? We're going to see in the Gemara there are two opinions. Do we paskin that the Avos were Masakin the Tfilos? Is that really correct? Okay, so the Gemara in Brachos says like this, a seminal Gemara, very important Gemara, and primarily tonight we're going to focus on Tfilas Arvis. We're going to talk about Maariv. We're going to talk about Yaakov Avinu. That's the Tfilah of Yaakov Avinu. So the Gemara says like this. There are two opinions in the Gemara. Itmar, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina Amar. Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Chanina, says, Tfilos Avos Tiknam. The Avos were Masakin the Tfilos. That's the sheet of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Amar, Tfilos Keneged Tamidin Tiknam. No, the Avos were not Masakin the Tfilos, but rather the Tfilos are Keneged the carbon Tamidim. Meaning, in the morning we bring a carbon Tamid Shel Shachar. So Shachris is Keneged the carbon Tamid Shel Shachar. In the afternoon we bring the carbon Shel Bein Arbayim. Mincha is Keneged the carbon Tamid Shel Bein Arbayim. And Maariv, well, there is no carbon tamid at night. Maariv is keneged hektar evarim v'chalavim, the burning of the fats and the limbs of the various carbonates that were not consumed in the fire during the course of the day. The kohen would come back at night, he would stoke the coals, he would turn over the meat, he would turn over the limbs, he would turn over the fats, and make sure everything burnt well. So according to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, Tfilos were niskan keneged the avos, and according to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, they are keneged the carbon tamidim. Okay, so there are two opinions. The Gemara then brings a brisa that supports Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina. And what's the brisa? So the brisa says clearly, Avraham was masakin shachris. Like the pasuk says, Vayashkem Avraham ba'boiker. Avraham got up in the morning, El hamokim asher omad sham, to the place that he stood. And the Gemara says, Amida only means tefillah. Amida refers to tefillah. And the Gemara brings a proof. Yitzchak was Masakein Mincha, the Brisa says. How do we know? It says, Vayeitzey Yitzchak, Lasuach Vasadeh. And the Gemara says, Vayein Sicha Ela Tefillah. And the Gemara brings a pasuk. Says the Gemara, Yaakov Avinu was Masakein Maariv, Shenemar Vayifka b'makom Vayein Pegia Ela Tefillah. So this is a brisa that says black and white. It says explicitly that the Avos were Masakin the three Tfilos Hayom. That is a brisa in support of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina. And then the Gemara brings a brisa to support the other opinion of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. And the Gemara goes through, quotes a brisa, and the brisa says that the Zmanei Tefillah, we know Shachris is either, according to one opinion, 4 hours into the day, or till Chatzos. It's based on when you could be makar of the carbon tamid. So the Gemara brings a brisa that says, why are you allowed to daven Shachris till Chatzos, or until Arba Shois, Keneged the carbon tamid shel Shachar? And why Mincha could you only daven ad ha'erev? Because the carbon tamid shel bein arbayim is only ad ha'erev. And why Maariv ein la keva? Because the hektar chalam evarim ein la keva. And why is Musaf either up to the 7th hour or kol hayom? Because the carbon Musaf was either up to the 7th hour or kol hayom. So that's a brisa that says explicitly like who? That brisa says explicitly like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. So that's a kasha on Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, because we have a brisa that says openly that the tfilos are keneged the carbon tamidim. And the Gemara says no. If you take a look at the end of this Gemara, it is 4 lines from the end of number 2. Neima tahavi tiyufta de Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. This brisa seems to be a refutation of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. And the Gemara says, no, it's not a refutation of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. Really, the Avos were masak in the tefillos. Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were masak in the tefillos. There are more sheets over here. Elamai, the Chachamim came along and hinged it on the Karbanos Hayom. So here, bottom line is that there are 2 opinions in Amoraim. That's namely, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina says the Avos were masak in the tefillos. Rabbi Shiur ben Levi says they're connected the various karbanos. The Gemara brings a brisa in support of both. The Gemara tried to disprove Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina from the fact that the Zmanei Tefillah are patterned after the karbanos. And the Gemara says it doesn't refute Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. Really, the Avos were masak in the tefillos, and they're just connected minimally to the karbanos. We're going to focus today primarily on the shita that the tefillos hayom were enacted by the Avos HaKadoshim. We're going to see, is there this machlokes, do we paskin one way over the other? And the answer is yes. Most Rishonim say we paskin, it was not enacted by the Avos. We'll see about that. But tonight's shiur, we're going to go lefi the shita of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, that the Avos were masak in the tefillos. The Avudraham is the classic work of a Rishon on the Siddur. The Avudraham comes from Seville. I was just there. And the Avudraham writes an amazing remez. I'll tell you, there's a hosafa to the remez, that if you take the second letter of all the names of the Avos, second letter of Abraham is a Beis, second letter of Yitzchak is a Tzadi, second letter of Yaakov is an Ayin, it's a remez to the tefillos that they were masakin. So Abraham was masakin Shachris. When do you daven Shachris? Boiker. So the Beis of Abraham. Yitzchak was masakin Mincha. When do you daven Mincha? Tzaharayim, the Tzadi of Yitzchak. Yaakov was masakin Arvis, Ayin of Yaakov Avinu. Adkan the Avudraham. That's what the Avudraham says. I once saw in the Oznaim LaTorah of Rav Zalman Sorotzkin, he quotes Vilna Gaon, who adds to this remez, Beis is Boiker, Tzadi is Tzaharayim, Ayin is Erev, that spells out Betza. So remember when they wanted to kill Yosef, what did Yehuda say? Ma Betza kinara gesachino. Meaning, what Yehuda was saying is, we know that if you kill somebody, the Rebbe is not makabel your tefillos, because it says, Gam ki sarvu v'tefillah ineni shameya. So Yehuda says, Ma Betza, if we're going to kill Yosef, we're going to lose out Betza. What's Betza? Shachris mincha Maariv, Boiker Tzarayim and Erev. Okay. Another connection between the tefillos and the Avos HaKadoshim, and that is fundamentally Shemona Esrei has how many brachos? 18 brachos. Why 18 brachos? The Yushalmi says in Masechta Brachos, it's keneged the 18 times in Chumash that Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov's name appears in one pasuk. 18 times in Chumash, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov appears in one pasuk. So the Yushalmi asks, what do you mean? I found the 19th one in this week's Parsha. V'hinei Hashem nitzav alav vayomar, Anochi Elokei Avraham avicha ve'Elokei Yitzchak. So that should be a 19th. The Gemara says it. And where's Yaakov? Well, he's talking to Yaakov. So no, that's not good enough. It has to say Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. It only says Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov 18 times in the Chumash in one pasuk. Bottom line is, this machlokes, who is masak in the tefillos? Was it the Avos? Or was it connected to the Tmidim? The Yismach Moshe, this is like this. Think about the following. You have the Avos were masak in the tefillos. What are they? Shachris, Mincha, and Maariv. Okay, Shachris, Mincha, Maariv. But we know in Judaism, the day starts with the nighttime. Right? Vayer Vayvoker. So why was Avraham masak in Shachris? He made a mistake. He should have been masak in Maariv. Why did Yaakov start the day? Well, he should have started at night. Avraham should have been masak in Maariv. Yitzchak should have been masak in Shachris. And Yaakov should have been masak in Mincha. Elamai, everybody agrees it's keneged the karbanos, and everybody knows when it comes to Kodshim, the night follows the day. The day begins in the daytime. Even though in halacha you always start the night before, when it comes to karbanos, you always start in the morning. So even the man Omar, Avos were masak in the tefillos, is maskim, agrees that it's keneged the karbanos. And that's why Avraham Avinu was masak in Shachris, Yitzchak was masak in Mincha, and Yaakov was masak in Maariv. Okay, Lefizah, just point out, it comes out very nice that the Gemara says in Masechta Brachos, Amar Reb Shimon bar Yochai, that until Avraham Avinu, nobody ever called Rebbeinu Shalom Adoi and then Noi. That was a name invented by Avraham Avinu. That's what the Gemara says. So there was once a siddur that was published in the times of the Vilna Gaon, and the author brought it to the Vilna Gaon for Haskama, and the Vilna Gaon opens up the siddur, and the first comment in the siddur is, why does Shachris begin with Adoi Noilam? That's the first thing in Shachris. And this siddur claimed, that the reason why Shachris is Adoi Noilam is since the Gemara says in Bracha, that Avraham Avinu was the first one to call the Rebbeinu Shalom Adoin, and who is Masakin Shachris? Avraham Avinu. So we're mitzaref the two ideas together. How does Shachris begin? Shachris begins Adoi Noilam because Adoin was the invention of Avraham Avinu. So the Vilna Gaon, when he heard this chiddush, he said it was kedai that the whole sefer be published, the whole siddur be published, just for this chiddush, that Shachris begins Adoi Noilam, because Adoin, God being Adoi Noilam, was the chiddush of Avraham Avinu. By the way, in the same vein, the Meshech Chachma, Rameir Simcha of Dvinsk, he's bothered by the following question. So every morning, you come to shul, there are not so many mitzvahs d'oraisa you have. You have Kriya Shema, and you have Birchas HaTorah, and you have Talis, and you have Tefillin. Why do we wear Talis and Tefillin by Shachris? Why don't we, wake up in the morning, put on Talis and Tefillin, and then come to shul? Right? I mean, I have a problem. Every time I go to a bris, I end up leaving my Talis and Tefillin either at the bris or in my house. It's too confusing. I like to leave it in one place. So why don't we just say that, put your talis and tefillin at home before you come to shul, and then daven shachris. Why do you have to do a talis and tefillin by shachris? So you say for Shema. Fine, so take it off after Shema. What's the inyan of davening shachris and a talis and tefillin? What does shachris have to do with the talis and tefillin? Says the Meshech Chachma, why are we zoicha to talis and tefillin? Because Avraham Avinu said, "Imichut va'ad sroichnal v'yemekach mikol hashalach." Avraham Avinu said, "I'm not taking anything from the portions of Sodom, from the spoils of Sodom. I'm not going to take a chut, and I'm not going to take a sroichnal." And in the chut that Avraham Avinu said, "I'm not going to take a string," we're zoicha to the string of tzitzis. In the chut that Avraham Avinu said, "I'm not going to take a leather strap," we're zoicha to the leather strap of tefillin. So since Shachris was the invention of Avraham Avinu, and Talis and Tefillin is in the schus of Avraham Avinu, again we're mitzaref the two together. Says Meshech Chachma, that's the only reason we wear Talis and Tefillin by Shachris. Otherwise, why do you have to wear by Shachris? It's because Shachris is the offering, the innovation of Avraham Avinu, and we're only zoicha to Talis and Tefillin in the schus of Avraham Avinu. So again, this is lefi the concept that Tfilos Avos Tiknam. But here we come to the whopper. Now let's talk about Maariv. Do you have to daven Maariv? No. Is Maariv a chiyuv or is Maariv a rishus? So I'm sure everybody knows. That's one of the things that everybody is mamish a baki, and there's a machloikes in the Tanam. Look in the Gemara Brachas Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel Tfilas Arvis. Ram Gamliel says it's a choiv. Rabbi Yeshua says it's a rishus. Abaye paskins that it's a choiv, like Ram Gamliel. Rava paskins it's a rishus. Anybody know you have machlokes Abaye and Rava? Who do we paskin like? You're both right. We paskin like Abaye in 6 cases, right? Remember in El Metzius Yal Kagam. And we paskin like Rava everywhere else. So this is not one of the Yal Kagam cases. So l'chor we paskin like Rava that it's a rishus, and that's how we paskin. By the way, Maariv is a rishus. You don't have to daven Maariv according to the Gemara. However, the Rishonim write that Klal Yisrael has already been mekabeled as a chayv. So sorry, it's already mandatory. But fundamentally, midina the Gemara, you do not have to daven Maariv. Maariv is a rishus. Now the Gemara continues with, I would say, this is the most famous Gemara in Shas. The Gemara says there's a story with the Talmud, and at the end of the Gemara reveals the Talmud was Hashem Eichai, and he comes before Rabbi Yeshua, and he says, Rabbi Yeshua, is Maariv a chayv or is it a reshus? Rabbi Shua says reshus. He came before Ram Gamliel. Ram Gamliel was the Nasi. This is right after the Churban Beis HaMikdash. And he says, Rabbi, Maariv reshus or a chayv? Ram Gamliel said, I can't answer you right now. Actually, Ram Gamliel said it's a chayv. So the Talmud of Shimon Chai says, really? It's a chayv? Rabbi Shua just told me it's a reshus. Ram Gamliel said, oh no, not again. He said, we have to wait until all the Talmidei Chachamim come into the Beis Medrash. They're called the shield bearers. We're going to wait until all the shield bearers come into the Beis Medrash. And they all enter the Beis Medrash. And he tells, Reb Gamliel tells the student, "Nu, pose the question again. Is Maariv a chayv or reshus?" Rosh Hashanah gets up on the chair. He announces, "Is Maariv a chayv or reshus?" Reb Gamliel, the Nasi, he has the right to speak. He says, "It's a chayv." And then he says, "Does anybody argue on me?" And Rabbi Shua is like sitting there sittering, "No, not me. I don't argue on you." And Reb Gamliel, who was very authoritarian, and he held Beshita Nahoig Nesiascha Rama. You have to be very tough. And the reason he held that way is because in the aftermath of the Churban, he felt that if Klal Yisrael is, if the position of Nasi is weak, then Klal Yisrael would sort of dissipate and fade away. So he held, for the benefit of Klal Yisrael, he has to rule with an iron fist. He said, "Rabbi Yeshua, you're not telling the truth. They say over in your name that you say it's a reshus." And Rabbi Gamliel then turns to Rabbi Yeshua. "Rabbi Yeshua, stand up. They're going to testify against you." And Rabbi Yeshua says, "No, wait a second. If I would be alive, which I am, and that guy would be dead, which he's not, then I could lie and say I never said it. But now that I'm alive and he's alive, I can't deny it." So first of all, there are a lot of questions over here. Number one, why did Rabbi Yeshua lie? And Gamliel says, "Does anybody argue on me?" So Rabbi Yeshua says, "Oh, not me. I don't argue on you." So why did he lie? So you'll say, and then Mukhe Yosef says this, he lied because Laman HaShalom, he didn't want to start a machlokes. So he sort of said, "No, whatever." He said, "No, I don't argue on you." And then Mukhe Yosef says, you see from here that Laman HaShalom, you're allowed to lie. But again, I mean, they had so many machlokes in the past, like why is he lying here? He never hid his contravening opinion before, why is he lying here? And number two, what's this like, all of a sudden Rabbi Shua is getting all poetic. If I were alive and he was dead, then I would contradict him. But now that I'm alive and he's alive, a living person can't contradict another living person. Just say, you know what, you got me, I said it. Like, what's this whole rhetoric about living and dead and contradicting? Just say it straight. And Rabbi say, finally, this is the main question of tonight. This is a question, a fundamental question in Machshavas Yisrael. The following question. Who is the greatest of all the Avos? Was it Abraham? Was it Yitzchak? Or was it Yaakov? Chazal tell us clearly, Yaakov Avinu is the greatest of all the Avos. Yaakov Avinu is Bechir Shabavos. How do we know? Whose image is chakuk on the Kisei HaKavod? Not Abraham, not Yitzchak. Yaakov's image is on the Kisei HaKavod. So before this year, if you didn't know anything, and we stopped you on the street corner, we said, well, you know, if Yaakov is the greatest of all the Avos, which tefillah do you think is the most important? Then everyone would say, of course, Maariv, because Yaakov Avinu was Masaki Maariv, so probably it's the most important tefillah. And yet, Shachris is a chayv, Mincha is a chayv, and Maariv is optional. Haloi davarhu, it doesn't make any sense. Why would that be? If Yaakov Avinu is the greatest of all the Avos, he's Bechir Shabavos, then why would his tefillah be the least important of all the tefillahs? That is the kasha of the Heilige Chasam Sofer. It says the Chasam Sofer in Parsha Tzav, look at number 9, Gam Yishlachgar, Ki tefillos avos tiknam. Then, the Yaakov, Muvchar Shaba Avos. Why would Maariv only be Rishus Haloi Davarhu? It doesn't make any sense. Okay. So I just want to share with you the following. The Gemara in Shabbos on Daf Tesamid Beis brings down the opinion, just agavorcha, that Maariv is Rishus. The Gemara on Daf Tesamid, look at number 11, L'man da'amar tfilas arvus Rishus. Comes Rashi, and Rashi says a chidush noira v'ayah. Says Rashi, you know why Maariv is Rishus? Because Maariv is not Keneged Tamid Shel Shachar, it's not Keneged Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim, it's Keneged the burning of the fats and the limbs. And if you bring a carbon and you don't burn the fats and the limbs, it's still mechaper for you. So since the burning of the fats and limbs are not essential, Maariv is not essential. Rashi is clearly mashma that Maariv would only be a rishus if tefillah is Keneged Karbanos. But if tefillah is Keneged the Avos, then Maariv would have to be a chiyuv. You hear this, Rashi? Rashi is saying, why would Maariv be rishus? Because tefillah is Keneged the Karbanos, and the burning of the flesh and the limbs is optional. Rashi clearly implies that if tefillah was masakin by the avos, then the same way shachris is a chiyuv and mincha is a chiyuv, Maariv would also be a chiyuv. Why would Yaakov Avinu's tefillah be any less than anybody else's tefillah? So just bear that in mind, that according to Rashi, the only way to say Maariv is rishus is if tefillah is keneged, the bringing of karbanos. Let's progress. Let's continue. If you look in the Rambam in Hilchos Tefillah in Parak Aleph is very clear that he paskins that the tefillos are not keneged the avos, but they were keneged the karbanos. How is that clear? If you look in the Rambam, look at number 13. The Rambam says that the number of tefillos are keneged the karbanos. You have 2 tefillos, morning and afternoon, keneged tamid shel shachar, tamid shel ben arbaim, and then Maariv is keneged the burning of the Eivarim. The Rambam doesn't make any mention of the fact that the tefillah is keneged the avos. The Rambam then says in halacha tests, if you want to daven more than 3 times a day, are you allowed to? Rambam says, yeah. Why? Because you could bring more than as many karbanos as you want, so you could daven as many times as you want. Again, the Rambam seems to be saying, clearly, tefillah is keneged the karbanos. The Rambam says, could a tzibur daven more than 3 tefillos a day? No, says the Rambam. Because only an individual could bring more karbanos, a tzibur cannot bring more karbanos. So the Rambam very clearly is paskening, tefillah is keneged the karbanos, and is not keneged the avos. Who's the Rambam paskening? Like Rabbi Shiur ben Levi, and not like Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. Where does the Rambam get this from? He took it from the leader. He took it from the Rif. The Rif also is clearly mashma. Look at number 14. The Rif says he brings down the opinion that the avos from Masakin the Tfilos, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. He brings down the opinion of Rabbi Shiur ben Levi. And he just quotes the part of the Gemara of the Brisa that supports Rabbi Shiur ben Levi. He doesn't even quote the part of the Gemara that brings a Brisa in support of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. So the Rif seems to be saying clearly, like the Rambam, that tefillah is keneged the karbanos. And the Rif writes this explicitly. The Rif paskins, look at number 15, and Daf Yud Beis to Daf Yud Gimel Amaf B'Dafei HaRif. The Rif says, is a tzibur allowed to daven tfilas nedava? No, says the Rif, because we paskin. The words of the Rif are, Da'anan, Dekai Melon, tefillah is keneged tmidin. We paskin, the tefillah is keneged, the carbon tmidin. And that's why a tzibur cannot daven more tefillas a day than 3, because they can't bring more karbanos. So the Rambam and the Rif both paskin that tefillah is keneged the karbanos. And the question is, why do the Rambam and the Rif paskin that way? Who told the Rambam and the Rif? Based on what? Do the Rambam and the Rif reject the notion that tefillah is keneged the avos? Why do they paskin? Based on what do they paskin that tefillah is keneged the karbanos? Why do they do that? Comes in a tziv, and then the tziv says, I'll tell you why they paskin that tefillah is keneged the karbanos. They hold you have to say tefillah is keneged the karbanos. Why? Listen carefully, says in the tziv. Because since everybody paskins that Maariv is rishus, that Maariv is optional, that Maariv is discretionary. Well, if we paskin Maariv is discretionary, that means we paskin tefillah is keneged karbanos. Because if tefillah is keneged the avos, Maariv would have to be mandatory. Says in the tziv, you know how the Rambam and the Rif know we paskin tefillah is keneged karbanos? From the fact that the halacha is Maariv is rishus. Maariv being optional only works out if you hold tefillah is keneged karbanos, and then Maariv is keneged the burning of the fats and the limbs, which are optional in the evening. But according to the Shita, that the Avos were Masakin Tefillah, you can never say Maariv is Rishus. So if you say Maariv is Rishus, that means we're paskening that Tefillah is Keneged the Karbanos. And that's how the Rambam and the Rif know that.
So Rabbi, how would it apply if somebody missed the Shachrit, he was in a long flight, and he had to do double dose on Monday?
Yeah, whenever you miss a Tefillah, you could always make it up in the next Tefillah.
So that counts for the...
That's based, by the way, that's based on Tefillah Keneged Karbanos Tiknam.
Same day.
Okay, but bottom line is, why would the Rambam and the Rif say that we paskin Tefillah is Keneged Karbanos? It's based on the fact that Maariv is Rishus. So just think about what we're doing. Watch what we're doing. We're saying there are two machlokes in Shas. One machlokes is between Ram Gamliel and Rabbi Shua. Is Maariv a chayv or is Maariv a Rishus? There's another machlokes in Shas between Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina, and Rabbi Shua ben Levi, who was Masaki in the Tefillah. Rabbi Shua ben Levi says, who is Masaki in the Tefillah? It's Keneged Karbanos. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina says, it's Avos Tiknam. What the Netziv is doing is, he's locking the two machlokes in together. It's Talei Zeh. If you hold that the Avos were Masaki in Tefillah, Maariv would be an absolute chayv. After all, why would Yaakov Avinu's Tefillah be any less than anybody else's Tefillah? But if Tefillah is Keneged Karbanos, then you're locking Maariv into being a Rishus. Now it happens to be that the Netziv says that that can't be, because then what's Ram Gamliel's problem with Rabbi Yeshua? Oh, Rabbi Yeshua, you hold Maariv as Rishus, Rabbi Yeshua should just say, what do you mean? It's machlokes Tanoim. There's nothing to do with me. We have brises that say that the Avos were Masakin, and then Maariv would be a Chayv, and we have brises that say that it's Keneged the Karbanos, and then Maariv would be Rishus. So it's not so simple just to lock the two machlokes in together, but the Netziv changes it ever so slightly. Listen carefully. It says like this. If the Avos were Masakin Tefillah, there is no question in the world that Maariv would be a Chayv. But if it's Keneged the Karbanos, you could make the case that Maariv is optional, and you could also make the other case, and you could say, look, yes, it's Keneged the burning of the fats, which don't have to be done, but once the Rabbanan were Masakin at Tefillah, maybe they were Masakin at a Chiyuv. When do you ever have the Rabbanan Masakin things that are optional? Here's a mitzvah, if you want you could do it, but you don't have to. It's not a normal thing, it's not a typical thing. But bottom line is that what we're saying is still very difficult. The Chida, in his Parish on Shas in the Pesach Einayim, he says if you learn the Gemara, it's not mashma that these two machlokes are dependent on each other. The Gemara implies these are two independent machlokes. One machlokes is who is Masakin Tefillah, the Avos or is it Keneged Karbanos? And whatever you say, Maariv could be Rishus or Maariv could be a Chayv. And these two machlokes are not dependent on each other. Otherwise, why would they be in two separate sugyas? They should be brought together. We should prove one concept from the other, and vice versa. The fact that they're brought in as two separate machlokes and mean they're not dependent on each other. And then Netziv says you have to say they're not dependent on each other. You know why? Because there's a shiltus. And we mentioned the shiltus last week. The shiltus wrote like mitzvahs on the Parsha HaShavua. And the shiltus you have on your sheet in number 21. The shiltus says very clearly that he paskins not like the Rambam and not like the Rif. He paskins the Avos from Masakin and the Tefillos. And yet, Maariv is still a Rishus. So how are you going to answer that one? The shiltus says the Avos from Masakin and the Tefillos, and Maariv is still a Rishus. So how do you reconcile that? It must be, even though Yaakov Avinu is Masaki and Maariv, it's still optional. So now the question is, why would that be? So that's what we're here for tonight. To try to be able to explain how even if Yaakov Avinu, the greatest of all the Avos, his tefillah is Maariv, nevertheless Maariv is not a chiyuv. Again, don't leave the shir and say, well, I don't have to have Maariv. We already said that Klal Yisrael was makabel upon themselves Maariv, and nowadays Maariv is a chiyuv. But fundamentally, Medina the Gemara, we paskin Maariv as a shus. How does that fit into Yaakov Avinu's Masakin Maariv? So the Netziv, in his commentary to the Shiltus, and the Beis Elikim, the Mabit, Rav Moshe Mitrani, contemporary of the Arizal, and the Pnei Yeshua, Masach the Brachas, they all say the same idea. David Richter, also you want to say that?
Yeah, I think
They say that Maariv is more, your Chiyuv is more of a power for the Neshama because it's...
I don't know. I just know what it says over here. I'm not so... So they say the following idea. You got to know this week's Parsha. Let's get the storyline. And this will explain why, even though Yaakov is Masake and Maariv is not mandatory. Let's get the story. Yaakov is running away from Esav. And he starts off in Beersheba, which is in the south. And just let's get where he's going. Yerushalayim is a little bit north. Yerushalayim is between Yehuda and Binyamin. Above that is Beisel, which is between Binyamin and Yosef. And Yaakov Vayeitzey Yaakov mi Beersheba vayelech Charana. Charana is all the way in the north. So Yaakov is going south to north. And Vayachalom, right? He had a dream. So Rashi says, this ladder, its feet are in Beersheba on the south, its top is in the north in Beisel, and Emtza Shipui, the middle of the slant, is opposite Yerushalayim. Correct Rashi, the Gemara tells us Yaakov Avinu called Yerushalayim Beisel. What are you talking about? Beisel and Yerushalayim are 100 miles away from each other. Yerushalayim is in the middle of Eretz Yisrael, Beisel is in the north. Why would he call Yerushalayim Beisel? Beisel is Luz. Says Rashi, what happened was like this. Yaakov Avinu is traveling south to north. He starts off in Beersheba. He passes by the Beis HaMikdash. Does he stop? He does not stop. He forgot to stop. And then he gets to Beisel. And then he goes to Char and he says, Oy vey! Could it be I passed by the place where my ancestors daven, Avram and Yitzchak, and I didn't daven? So at Beisel, he turned around to go south to Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim jumped to Yaakov Avinu. Not kfitzas haderech, like Eliezer had. Eliezer had kfitzas haderech. Kfitzas haderech means when you fly. Yaakov Avinu had kfitzas haaretz. The earth came to him. When he headed south from Beisel to Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim came to him. So he called Yerushalayim Beisel because Yerushalayim came to Beisel. So says the Netziv, just think about what happened. When Yaakov Avinu passed by the Makom HaMikdash, around Shkia time, was he planning on davening? No. Fiharaya, he didn't daven. And then he said, you know what? Could it be that I passed by the place where my forefathers davened and I didn't daven? Okay, fine, I'll also daven. So the whole Maariv that he davened was like a second thought. He never really had in mind to do it. It was an afterthought. So since historically, what the Maisa Shahaya, you got to know the story. The story was, he didn't really plan on davening, and he said, you know what, my forefathers davened, fine, I'll also daven. So the whole davening was just a nadava. It was just, he volunteered. He wasn't even going to. If it was a chiyuv, he would have done it. He wouldn't have forgot. So it must be from the fact that Yaakov Avinu davened as a tefillas nadava, Maariv is only Rishus. Avada Yaakov Avinu is the greatest of all the others. But the way he davened Maariv was as a nadava, as a Rishus. That's what the Netziv says. But let's add on a deeper level. Why was it? This is Mam Shoyim Menorah. Why was it that Avraham Avinu davened mitaras chiyuv, Yitzchak davened mitaras chiyuv, and Yaakov davened as a Rishus? Listen to the following. This is from the Sefer Beis Elokim. Beis Elokim, it should be more well known. It was written by Rav Moshe Metrani, the contemporary of the Arizal. When they reinstated Smicha and Svas in the 1500s, he was one of the 4 Chachamim who got Smicha. Lakewood, at their dinner, they didn't give out a journal. They gave out the Sefer Beis Elokim. Must have been like 30 years ago, but it's a very chashuv Sefer. He says like this: the first Galus and the first Binyan Beis HaMikdash is Keneged Avram Avinu. The second Galus and the second Binyan Beis HaMikdash is Keneged Yitzchak Avinu. Our Galus and the final building of the Beis HaMikdash is Keneged Yaakov Avinu. Says the Beis Elokim. The first Galus was Galus Mitzrayim. Galus Mitzrayim, it was capped. It was a chiyuv. We had to be there for 430 years, and when the time was up, we left. There's no discretion over it. No discretion, no rishus. We had a time limit. When the time was up, bang, God took us out. Not 1 second earlier, not 1 second later. Okay, we played around with the numbers, but the numbers were set in stone. So Shachris is a chayv. Avram Avinu, when he was mispalel at the Makoy Ma'amikdash, he was mispalel that the first base of English should be built and Hashem should take us out of Mitzrayim. As a chayv, it was set in stone. The date was set in stone. There was no playing around. Second base HaMikdash and second Galus. Second Galus was when the first base HaMikdash was destroyed. We went into Bavel for 70 years. The Navi Yirmiyah says, go to Bavel, build houses, plant orchards. You ain't coming back a second sooner than 70 years. It was a chayv. And when those 70 years were up, the tefillah of Yitzchak Avinu triggered God being obligated to take us out at that time. That's why Mincha is a chayv. Comes Yaakov Avinu, and Yaakov Avinu is mispalel for our Galus. Now our Galus, in one way it's the longest, and in one way it's the shortest. Why? It's the longest because, look, it's 2,000 years. But the day after the second base of Mikdash was destroyed, Chal Yisrael already started davening as Semach David Avdecha Meheres Hatzmiach Yushalayim Merch Racham Tashiv. Why? Because it was Rishus. It was Biyadenu. It has nothing to do with Hashem. Hashem has no chiyuvim to build the third base of Mikdash. We will stay here forever and ever and ever and ever until we do tshuva. It's Rishus. Rishus means it's up to us. That's why Maariv is Rishus. Not because it's less important, because it's much more important. Because the other tefillos are just like set in stone. There was a certain obligatory amount of time we had to do, and when that time was up, bam, God took us out. This Galus is Rishus. If we want, we could be out in 30 seconds. If we do what we need to do, we live. The Shiur is over. Obviously, we have to wait for the Shiur to be over because Talmud Torah is much greater than Binyan Beis HaMikdash. We said over the story that the Baba Sali wanted to bring Mashiach. Rabbi Avad Yosef said, no, we can't bring Mashiach in the middle of Shiur. And Rabbi Baba Sali said, what do you mean? If we don't bring Mashiach now, we're going to have to wait. Who knows how long? Rabbi Avad Yosef said, what can we do? So Talmud, but as soon as the Shiur is over, if we want, we could bring Mashiach right away. People say, I can't come to Mashiach. Very important things to do. More important than Mashiach. Even Mashiach would have to wait for the Shiur. Nobody likes to hear that. What can I tell? I can only tell you the truth. So, but the third, Maariv is Rishus because the third Galus and Geula is completely Rishus. It's completely Biyadenu. That's how the Beis Elikim understands this. Let me tell you two more things, and we'll wrap it up. We'll call it a night. We've certainly quoted this Gadol before. Certainly one of my favorites. But we never quoted this Sefer before. We've quoted many times the Rama Mipano, Rav Nachman Azaria of Pano, but he also wrote Shalos HaTshuvos. I don't think we ever quoted from the Shalos HaTshuvos Rama Mipano before. And he says an astounding thing. We'll see if we could say it over properly. Rama Mipano was one of the great Mikubalim. He was a tremendous Talmud of the Ramak, Ramesh Cordovero, and also he was a Talmud of the Arizal through Rabbi Yisrael Saruk. Rabbi Yisrael Saruk was a Talmud of the Arizal before Reb Chaim Vital. So Rabbi Yisrael Saruk had traditions from the Ari that Reb Chaim Vital never even learned, and he passed it on to the Rama Mipano, and then it traveled on to the Mekubalim of the Olam HaYeshivos, of the Vilna Gaon and the Baal HaLashem. It says like this. Avram Avinu, when he davened his tefillah, things were nice, things were good, things were comfortable. So, when life is good, you gotta daven Shachris, just like Avram Avinu daven Shachris. And Yitzchak Avinu also. Vayeitzey Yitzchak l'suach basada, life was good, he daven Mincha. So when life is good for us, we gotta daven Mincha. And certainly if life is bad and things are difficult, we certainly have to daven. Yaakov Avinu, when did he daven Maariv? When he's running away for his life. When he went to Galus. So that's why Maariv is a Rishus. Because if things are going okay and you're not being chased after by an Esav and you're not in Galus, then Yaakov only daven because he had a tzara. So if you don't have a tzara, you don't have to daven. I mean, yeah, we do what the Avos did, but Yaakov davened for a reason. He was B'tzar, he was running away from Esav. So if life is good, you don't have to daven Maariv. That's why many Tanoim hold Maariv is a Rishus. Why nowadays is Maariv a chayv? Because we're in an endless galus. We're B'tzara. So Avada Maariv nowadays is a chayv. Like Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu was running away from Esav. Yaakov Avinu was in exile. Yaakov Avinu was B'tzara. But when the Beis HaMikdash stood, Avada Maariv was Rishus. Nowadays we're in the same predicament as Yaakov Avinu. So Maariv is a chayva. So now we understand the Machlokes and Gamliel and Rabbi Shua. It was right after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. So Gamliel held, okay, Beis Hamikdash is destroyed. Now Maariv becomes a chayv. Yeah, yesterday when the Beis Hamikdash stood, Maariv is a rishus, but it's not yesterday anymore. Now the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, so Maariv is a chayv. Rabbi Yeshua wanted to push the envelope. Rabbi Yeshua said like this: okay, Beis Hamikdash is destroyed. When was Mashiach born? Chazal say on the day the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. So Mashiach is a chai, is alive. Elamai, we just got to bring him, but he's basically around the corner. So if we could be koiveya the halacha that Maariv is a rishus, then that will establish the fact that our situation is not so bad, and Mashiach is just around the corner, and we're going to bring him. We're going to establish the reality. If you say Maariv is a rishus, if we could establish that the halacha is Maariv is a rishus, then we could basically create the reality that the geula is imminent, and we're not in a predicament like Yaakov Avinu, and Mashiach will come very soon. That's what Rabbi Yeshua was after. So that's why Rabbi Yeshua said, Maariv is rishus. Because he was sort of trying to push the envelope. He was trying to because the halacha creates the reality. So if he says Maariv is rishus, it's going to make it that it's because, Mashiach is imminent. But Ram Gamliel held, look, Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, so the reality is we're B'tzara, we're in exile. So as soon as Ram Gamliel says, I hold Maariv as a chayv, does anybody argue on me? Rabbi Yeshua is not really lying by saying, yeah, I agree that it's a chayv. Because Rabbi Yeshua understands, look, the reality is Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, and we're B'tzara, and we're like Yaakov Avinu running away into Golos. So yeah, I could see what you're saying. I hear, you're right, really, but I'm just trying to force the issue. So Rabbi Yeshua said, okay, fine, I agree with you. But what he was saying was like this. If I'm alive and he's dead, you know who the he is? Mashiach. Then I could argue on you. Excuse me, I could deny that I disagree with you. And I could go along with you. If I were alive and Mashiach were dead, I would say, Gamliel, I agree to you that now we're B'tzara, now we're in a terrible situation, so I would agree to you that Maariv is a chayv. But I'm alive, and Mashiach is also alive. That's the secret of the Gemara. Not the guy testifying against me is alive. The geula is alive. The geula is imminent. Now that the geula is imminent, I argue on you. I say Maariv should still be a rishus, because the geula could happen so quickly that we're not like the predicament of Yaakov Avinu. We could bring the geula immediately, so therefore Maariv should have to be rishus. Okay, Rabbi, let's end with this. Let's end with the Yisoid of the Chassam Sofer. Again, back to the original question. Yaakov Avinu is the greatest of all the Avos, so why is Maariv only a rishus? So Chassam Sofer says, tremendous Yisoid. Based on the Chayvus Havavos. Gemara says in Yevamos, Kol ha'omer ein li ela Torah afilu Torah ein lai. Anybody who says, I just have Torah, even Torah he doesn't have. What does that mean? Chavos Havavos explains that if somebody is a stickler for what it says, it says that I have to daven Shachris. Okay, what time is Shachris? Shachris 7 o'clock. I'll do it 7 o'clock. And what time is it over? 7:40. I'll leave exactly 7:40. After, what do you want from my life? It's over. So I do exactly what it says. It says you have to learn. Okay, I have to learn in the morning. Okay, I learn a pasuk in the morning. It says you have to learn at night. Okay, I'll learn a pasuk at night. If a person just does what it says, then they're basically serving Hashem on a very low level. They're serving Hashem out of fear. It's just like a responsibility that you can't wait to shirk. The highest madrega of avodas Hashem is when you understand, well, if the Rebbeinu Shalom is asking me to do something, he must like it, so let me try to do as much as I can. It's a different attitude, it's a different type of devotion, where really Avas Hashem is only demonstrated by a person doing something as an adava, by a person doing something he's not required to do. If you only do your required, the bare minimum, then you're just basically doing it because I have to do it. And as soon as I'm able to check off on the checklist, can't wait until it's over. So that is the concept of tefillah. Yeah, we have two tefillahs which are chiyuvim. Avram Avinu is Masakin Shachar, Yitzchak Avinu Masakin Mincha. Those are the lower level tefillah. The highest madrega of tefillah is the tefillah of Yaakov Avinu, because it's a tefillah you don't have to do. And when a person goes above and beyond what they're obligated to do, and they do it out of the motivation, generosity of their heart, they're doing it out of Avas Hashem. Avas Hashem is the highest madrega. And that is why Yaakov Avinu, says the Chassam Sofer, the greatest of the Avos, the Bechir Sheb Avos, he was actually Masakin, the most important tefillah. Maariv being a Rishus is not symptomatic of Maariv being lesser than the other tefillahs. Maariv being a Rishus is symptomatic of the fact that Maariv is the greatest of all the tefillahs. Rabbi, thank you everyone for coming. Have a great evening. Shaya.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.